Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of What's in the Pipe. I'm your host, Marissa Davis, and here with me today to discuss the final rule issued by PHMSA in November of last year, we have G2's Manager of Regulatory Compliance, Al Giordano, G2's Director of Regulatory Compliance, Wally McGaughey, and Vice President of Software, Tracy Thorleifson. Thanks for being here with me today, guys. Okay, Al, so let's start off with you. Can you just explain briefly what was included in the final rule or part 3 issued by PHMSA and how it's changed the regulations for gathering lines?
Sure, thanks, Marissa. So the new rule that was promulgated by PHMSA is focused around gathering lines. Gathering lines are those lines going from wellheads to a collection or processing center. In the past, PHMSA had regulated only specific types of gathering lines based on class location and size. What PHMSA did with this new rule was they expanded their definition of what's considered to be a gathering line. And so they've created two new types of gathering lines. They've created a type C gathering line and a type R gathering line. Type C gathering line is defined by its diameter. And then they've also created what they call a type R line, which is considered to be all onshore gathering lines. So for type R lines, which is every gathering line, regardless of diameter, regardless of size, the operator is required to report those lines as part of their annual report to PHMSA. So currently for the 2022 year, operators are required to determine if they have any gathering lines and then report them as part of their 2022 annual report that's due in 2023. For the type C lines, depending on the diameter and the pressure of the line, operators are required to include those gathering lines in their pipeline safety programs. Now, based on the size of the line, there are different programs that they're required to have for those gathering lines. So for instance, the smaller end of the gathering lines, the new type Cs from 8 to 12 inches, you must have a damage prevention plan. That's one of the criteria for the new type of gathering line.
Part of the reason behind this, there were some failures that occurred on some gathering lines in various places around the country that were relatively rural in their installation and where they were located. A couple of cases where a farmer's house was burned down where a line failed. And these gathering lines weren't regulated at the time, although they operated very high pressures. The threat and the risk associated with them is equally as great as those that are in the more populated areas where we have high consequence areas. So PHMSA has, by recommendations through various agencies, has stepped up and brought these lines into regulation so that there's more oversight, more requirements for maintenance and such and operations on these lines.
PHMSA has estimated that there's an additional 425,000 miles of gathering line that's going to be added to the overall total of lines in the United States. Now that includes the lines that PHMSA knows about. Operators that have gathering lines, operators that may not be reporting those lines, but know that they have them. There's a whole nother class of operators that have never had to be regulated before. Historically.
And who all is going to be required to comply with these regulations?
There's a lot of folks out there operating gathering lines that have their exploration and production companies. They're typically regulated under state regulations. They're through the oil and gas division, not the pipeline division of the state agencies. They don't deal with Department of Transportation regulations. They don't deal with pipeline regulations. So it's incumbent upon the state agencies now, the state pipeline safety agencies, begin to try to identify these folks as who they are.
And you know, more to that point, Wally, most of those operators who fall in that category have, you know, never run DOT class location analysis on anything. They have no idea what it is.
Right.
It's going to be a brave new world for those operators.
Right, and identifying those class locations is the basis of this thing, is to be, you know, identify the risk associated with the operation of these pipelines. Where are they located? What are they close to? You know, it's an area that has been overlooked for quite some time. Typically, these lines are regulated. Even those states that do have regulation for gathering, these are done by the states. So this is a new territory for PHMSA, if you will, stepping out into gathering lines to this extent, taking them all the way up to the end of production.
Will workers on these newly regulated gathering lines have to fall under operator qualification regulations? And will they have to be qualified to the covered tasks they'll be performing?
That's an excellent question. I've been asked by several operators already regarding this. There's a variety of regulations that are being questioned as to whether or not they're going to have to comply with them. Operator qualification is one. And the answer is no. At this point in time, as odd as that seems, they'll be performing covered tasks in some cases, depending upon the type of gathering that they have. Control room management as well. There's going to be gathering lines out there now that are going to be brought into regulation, that an operator has a SCADA system, and there is telemetry on these gathering lines that is seen by that and cause that SCADA system to have now regulated pipeline in its control room, which means they're going to have a control room management program. But under this new rule, they don't have to do that.
Yeah, Marissa, the rule is very specific to what's applicable to the different types of lines. Reporting is applicable to all types of lines, A, B, C, and R classifications. Reporting for incidents is required for A, B, and C lines. Reporting for safety-related conditions is required for A, B, and C lines, but not for type R lines. And then the criteria for type C lines, again, as the diameter goes up, the operator has more to do for those lines. So you start with a damage prevention plan and an emergency plan, right? And then, if the line goes up another diameter, then you have to have line markers. You have to have a public awareness plan. And then, like Wally said, you have to have corrosion control. And additionally, one thing that we haven't talked about yet is that new type C lines that go in have to meet the design and construction standards included in Part 192, which is a whole nother slew of regulations that gathering line operators have never historically had to deal with before. So this is a monumental change in the way that PHMSA is really looking at gathering lines.
Here's one for you, Tracy. What tools or resources will be necessary to achieve compliance with the new regulations?
But basically, you're going to need some sort of software that enables you to calculate class location, as the Gas HCA tool does, and then furthermore performs the regulated gathering determination on that basis. Now, to do all of that, you're going to need various types of data available to you. First and foremost, of course, you're going to need your structures and qualifying outside areas and qualifying structures to perform a class location analysis. Many gathering system operators haven't been collecting this data, and particularly those who have never performed a class location analysis. So this is the first big hurdle. And there are public sources available for it, but at the end of the day, you get down to actually digitizing structure footprints in your GIS, and then going out and field verifying what type of structures those are, whether or not they're residential structure or commercial structure or what have you. Then you run class, and to perform the regulated gathering determination on top of that, you need some additional information on your pipe. Right, so you need to have the pipe diameter. As Al mentioned, there are several different criteria in terms of how comprehensive those integrity management requirements are. And so obviously you need to have your diameter in there. But also, just as importantly, you need your operating pressure and your pipe material and your percent smice. And percent smice is particularly important in this analysis, because if you don't know what it is, you have to assume that you're operating at 20% or greater, and then you're going to end up with type A and type R and type C and no type B. And as a result of that, you miss out on a little bit of relaxation in some of the requirements on integrity management. So it's very important that you collect all of this data and you get into a form that you can consume for the analysis. And of course, we prefer to do that inside of a geographic information system, inside of GIS, but you don't necessarily have to do it in that type of settings.
And when are operators required to comply with the new gas gathering rule?
So there's two specific compliance dates that operators need to be aware of. November 16th, 2022, which is 6 months from the date of publication, operators are required to have identified all of their type C lines in their system. And then by May of 2023, as part of the annual report, operators must include their mileage for all types of gathering lines in their system, A, B, C, and R. And then finally, the one continuing compliance date is that if an operator determines that there's a class location change around their gathering lines, they have 1 year to comply with the requirements for gathering lines in that class location. So if you have a type R line, for instance, that isn't required to do anything but be reported, and then 2 months later, the operator determines that there's a class change. Somebody built a building near the line and it caused a change in class location. The operator has 1 year from the date of discovery, the determination of applicability of that class location to implement those requirements on their line.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you guys for your insights. If anyone has any questions related to the final rule or how G2 can help, you can reach out to me directly at marissa.davis@g2-is.com, and I can connect you with one of our SMEs. If you haven't done so already, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on social media to keep up to date on our latest updates. We'll see you next time. Until then, keep it flowing. It's under control.